The generative AI is a technology, even telling it into very basic language. So it analyzes text and it predicts and answers in response to the questions that you give it in the text. Of course, there are models that have now emerged which could also analyze images as well as the other data in addition to the text. But putting all of those elements together in terms of getting an accurate outcome, that is still, I would say, trial and error approach where means we see efforts are still needed to bring it into this context. Now, relating it to the use case, what I would discuss today would be how do we analyze the specification requirements from these external guidelines, ensuring that this information is extracted from those guidelines, then compiled together, and then compared also for differences between, say, for country A, country B, because the language of the guidelines, it is also different among different countries. The way they use some terminologies, that is also different between these guidelines that we have. And then also some of the specification requirements are different.
Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist. I'm your host, David Brühlmann, and today we're diving into the transformative world of generative AI. And not just as a buzzword. We're exploring how generative AI is revolutionizing regulatory compliance in biotech, ensuring your groundbreaking therapies actually reach the patients who need them. Ever feel like you're drowning in an ocean of constantly evolving global guidelines? Our guest knows that feeling all too well. Joining us from Rome is Abhijeet Satwekar, who is an innovation manager at Global Analytical Development within Merck KGaA healthcare business. Abhijeet is pioneering how AI can turn regulatory monitoring from your biggest headache into your competitive advantage. So grab your coffee, hit pause on that cell culture, and let's discover how AI is reshaping the regulatory landscape. This is part one of our conversation on harnessing generative AI to keep your medicines flowing to patients without compliance hiccups. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brühlmann, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Welcome, Abhijeet, to the show today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Likewise, David, and thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to share my scientific insights.
Of course, and it's a pleasure to have you back on because we talked, I think it's about a couple of years ago, about digital transformation and PAT. And now, again, you have been working on amazing topics, but I will tell about that a bit later. First of all, I would love to hear your take on this question I usually ask at the beginning because you speak to all kinds of different people in academia and industry consortia. So, Abhijeet, share something that you believe about bioprocess development that most people disagree with.
It's a very complex question, I should say. And as you know, that it has a lot of interacting elements on this topic. Means if you have to really detail around the challenges that some people agree, some people disagree. I would stick to this topic related to the technology since we are really tech focused. What really happens, there are a lot of technologies that have come in. But many of those technologies have really transitions into manufacturing, where the real benefits is really brought at a product level. This is again a multifaceted challenge. Means if the technology itself is really bringing that value, what we see in development, and how this value is translated into manufacturing. So I think this is a balance or a mix where there are a lot of agreements, disagreements that come in and come go. So I would keep it more neutral, let's say here. Huh?
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely, there is need for improvement to bring amazing technologies into the manufacturing space. Before we dive into the generative AI topic, for those of the listeners tuning in today who have not listened to the first episode, draw us back into your story. Tell us how you transitioned from academia over the different steps now to an innovation leader at Merck.
I completed my basic education in biotechnology, having a PhD degree, and then I mainly started to work on industrial project and mostly focused on the large molecules biotech part of the project. Joining Merck almost 12 years back means I was working in the analytical organization. And as you know, during that period, there was a trend to move towards digitalization. And this is where means I engaged into this topic of digitalization by acting as a side project lead for supporting the assessment of the digital maturity. And this is where means I was exposed to this complex landscape on how these IT systems are being brought together, how is, let's say, the movements of the data that flows around these systems, and then how do we take out the value of data from this. It has always been about data, the information, and turning it into the value, and this has attracted my interest. And then following that means I have been working mostly on those use cases where we could bring technologies to work on the data and to turn this data into value for the business. And this is where means I currently engage with the IT business partner, the IT organizations in general, then the functional group with whom we develop those use cases, understanding which value we are going to target. And then in terms of realizing the entire setup means we also deal with our regulatory colleagues, quality assurance colleagues, and so on. So it's really collaborative efforts across these multi-stakeholders when we try to build these digital applications and then bring it into their routine use.
So tell us about your generative AI project, because what I learned that is you using that to automate the business operations. But I think there's a lot more to the story. So tell us the background of that story.
So, I come from the CMC development organization and more specifically from global analytical development, where analytics is the core, how you present your products into the submissions that you follow with the authorities, right? And talking about analytics, so there are various guidelines that are provided by as the authorities or country specific guidelines that come in, which are there across the globe. Since the generative AI technology has come in as one of, let's say, a strongest technology that can assist in assessing text information and scientific information, this is where means we have been constantly looking around previously with natural language processing technologies, which were basic in the nature. But as the boom came in with this generative AI, we really went in and tried to conduct a proof of concept to evaluate how this generative AI can support our operations in the analytical specifications evaluations from the external guidelines. Telling you very concretely on this project that we initiated. But beyond that means we have also extended it into our other use cases as we developed our experience on the technology and then adapted it into these various areas.
Perhaps for us who are not so familiar with generative AI, can you give us a simple example or use case how you use that? I think that will help us better understand like what are the difficulties and the challenges and also the benefits.
So, as you know, the generative AI is a technology, even telling it into very basic language. So, it analyzes text and it predicts and answers in response to the questions that you give it in the text. Of course, there are models that have now emerged which could also analyze images as well as the other data in addition to the text. But putting all of those elements together in terms of getting an accurate outcome, that is still, I would say, trial and error approach where means we see efforts are still needed to bring it into this context. Now, relating it to the use case, what I would discuss today would be how do we analyze the specification requirements from these external guidelines, ensuring that this information is extracted from those guidelines, then compiled together, and then compared also for differences between, say, for country A, country B, because the language of the guidelines, it is also different among different countries. The way they use some terminologies, that is also different between these guidelines that we have. And then also some of the specification requirements are different. So imagine that for a product, right? So we cannot create one method for each guideline document. So what we really need to understand and interpret what are, let's say, the basic criterias common to all of those guidelines, then choose those criterias and then create our methods to fit with almost, let's say, at least the major global guidelines.
Oh, got you. So that means, for instance, if you do a release testing, you want to know what is the maximum level, like, for instance, for a certain product or for a residual protein or a wholesale protein or something like that, to give one example. And since there's so many guidelines, you want to know what is the common denominator, like what is the range that is applicable to all of these guidelines where you're going to sell the product in all these countries.
Exactly. And then also to give more context to that, you have monographs that are included in the guidelines. Plus, you also have some generic analytical conditions that are there, especially for some techniques. So we talk about resolution, etc., and so on. So those are very scientific in the nature, and it really needs some high expertise to interpret them into our baseline creation part of it. Now, also to give one more element to that. So these guidelines document, they have a certain period where these are updated. Okay, as per, let's say, evolving technology, the considerations that are coming up from the authorities and so on. These updates are set either as periodic or they are also done on an ad hoc level. So imagine that 5 or 10 guideline document that you're monitoring, you're maintaining its baseline, and then you have one guideline that updates. So you also need to assess what has been the update and what has been the impact of that update on your baseline that you have set and how it compares with the other guidelines. So that's really a comprehensive exercise that we need to invest a lot of efforts in. And we found this opportunity where Gen AI can really come in and then help us to at least accelerate the, let's say, the multi-guideline comparison, getting, let's say, the preliminary insights where the scientists can go in, cross-check, and then bring it back for the end users, for our operators to finalize the method as per the specifications.
And that wraps up part 1 of our conversation with Abhijeet Satwekar on revolutionizing guideline monitoring with generative AI. I don't know about you, but I'm already thinking about how this technology could save countless hours for biotech teams everywhere. If you're struggling with regulatory compliance and constantly feeling behind on guideline updates, don't wait for your competitors to adopt this technology first. Book a free call with me at BrühlmannConsulting.com to discover how you can fast-track your biotech development without these costly regulatory delays. I'll help you apply powerful strategies to your specific process development challenges. Join us for part 2, where Abhijeet will dive deeper into validation approaches and share metrics for measuring return on investment on digital transformation initiatives like this one. Until then, keep making bioprocessing smart. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.